If you're a founder building an MVP, stop, don't do it. I know that sounds a little bit insane. Every accelerator, every advisor, every startup playbook literally tells you you should build your MVP first. But here's what they aren't telling you. MVPs right now are just expensive ways to confirm that you built the wrong thing. And post-2025, an MVP is no longer the fastest way to learn. It's actually one of the slowest, and I'm going to prove it to you in this short video. And if you stick around to the end, I'll show you the exact validation technique we use that replaces months of building with hours of certainty, and why the smartest founders have already made this shift. So here's what nobody's saying out loud. MVP is no longer step one, unless of course you're still living in 2015. So an MVP, back when it was created, the goal was to get to market ASAP, and that's obviously still the goal. But fast in the wrong direction is still failure. Most founders who jump to MVP end up wasting months or years building the wrong thing. And the problem is that fast isn't good enough. Your goal is not to build. Your goal is to learn fast. And so here's why MVP used to work and why it fails today. So in 2010, around the time when MVPs first started coming out, building was super expensive and super slow. At the time, MVP was the fastest practical way to learn. You had to build something small, get it out there, and then that was how you learned, and then you'd iterate on that. Back then, the problem is in the AI world, MVP is way too slow and way too expensive, and it's no longer the fastest path to insight. So what you need is something faster, cheaper, smaller, and more iterative than what an MVP is able to provide. So let's talk about your new startup hero. So it's called a minimum viable experiment. Enables you to learn faster than an MVP. Now, what it is the smallest test that answers the most important unknown question. It's fast, it's cheap, it's low risk, and it's massively repeatable. And the key is that a few MVPs can replace 6 months of work towards an MVP. So a great MVE, minimum viable experiment, is about perfect bets. What does that I mean by that? So when you're out there as a founder, again, you're not trying to build a company. You're trying to place some bets with the hope that one of those bets is going to go big. So you're going to put something out there with a hypothesis, and your users are going to respond to it 10x more than you expected. That's what I mean, that a bet that pays off. So the goal of the MVP is to find this perfect bets that you can place as many of these well-formed bets as possible as fast as possible. So here's how founders get trapped. Trap number one. When you think about, okay, as I'm building out my MVP, I think about persona. You then find a problem. So we know who we're targeting. We look at what problem that they have. And then great, we know how to solve that. We can create a product to solve the problem that they have. The problem with this is we don't know, what if it's not a very important problem? And this is a trap that tons of founders get trapped by every year, right? Where they find something, some users say, yeah, that's definitely a problem that I have. But then you go and you build a solution to it and you say, well, it's not that important of a problem. I don't really care that much. So I'm not really willing to pay that much to solve the problem. So that's trap number one. Now, there's obviously a solution to this that's been around for a while and that has its own issues, right? And so the next step, kind of a more evolved step, is you start with the persona, you get to this problem, but before you solve it, you ask questions around the implications of that problem. So what are the consequences if you don't solve this problem? Right? So is it a minor nuisance if you don't solve this problem, or is it going to put you out of business? So this is sort of the more evolved step. And if you want a book that you can read that's phenomenal about this, it's called Spin Selling. I think it came out in the 1990s, but still one of the greatest books in terms of how to think about evolving a problem into the problems that are worth solving, right? So that's kind of the next level of evolution, is that you find problems that are high implications and then you create a product around that. The problem with that is you're jumping into you found a problem, you know that it's really important because it's got high consequence, and then you build something and you deliver it and they say, oh, that's great, but that doesn't really solve my problem, or it doesn't solve the problem the way that I want it to be solved. So there's a way to learn a lot faster than just finding these high consequence problems and then building a product around it, because that's very expensive. And so what is that approach? Start with a persona. Who are we approaching? What problem do they have? Go to that implication, and then once you have a high consequence problem, test the promise before you solve it. So a promise is a question that you can look at a customer and say, okay, You say you have a certain problem where things are too slow. Okay, if I could 10x the speed, would that be interesting to you? And if they say, it wouldn't really be interesting at all, well, okay, then if you build a product that actually accomplishes that 10x speed, you've wasted a lot of time. If you ask another question and they say, oh, that promise would be amazing, well, you can validate the promise before you build a product to go solve that promise, right? So what you want to do is go through this process of look at your persona, find the problem, find the high consequence, then test the promise. And until someone says, yeah, if you could actually deliver what you say, that would change everything. Then you go ahead and build it. So validate the promise first is the goal. So confirm that high consequence problem, that this is something that really matters, really needs to be solved. Develop a promise that solves it, posed as a question. If we can reduce cycle time by 80%, would that be valuable to you? The promise test kind of reveals their desire, their urgency, and the emotional intensity around it, and also how much they value. If you could do that, that would be absolutely incredible. Right. So imagine if I could bring the cost of gasoline down from $3 a gallon, or depending on where you live, $8 a gallon. If I could bring that down to 30 cents a gallon, would that be interesting to you? Well, yeah, of course it would be. So that would be an amazing promise. Now, obviously can't deliver that, so that's a problem. But you want to find a promise that gets people excited before you start working on the product that can solve that promise. And the goal of this is to filter out bad ideas or filter out bad solutions that may look like they solve the problem, but don't actually deliver a promise that's interesting to the end users. So how do you execute a minimum viable experiment? So the key is to build a killer demo. And here's why demos beat MVPs every single time. A demo shows the promise without having to build the MVP or the final product. So it's much more vivid than words. So you can build a slide deck that says, okay, here's the problem, here's the consequence of those problems, here's the promise that we're going to deliver. And that's obviously really interesting. A demo is that next level beyond here's the promise. The demo is, okay, and here's what that promise is going to look like once we deliver that demo. Right? It gives them a chance to visualize that in looking forward into the future. But it's dramatically lighter than coding a fully working MVP or a fully deliverable product. And here's the thing. AI makes stunning demos. It's possible that you can build this in days or even hours. This is something that, 30 years ago, so this has always been one of the secret weapons in the arsenal, is to build a demo before you actually go build out the entire product. But even the demos used to take a lot more effort to build something that didn't quite look like the real thing, say 30 years ago, 20 years ago. When you build a demo with AI right now, it looks like the future. It looks like the thing's real. We get comments saying, well, okay, can we just deliver this thing now? Okay, that's a demo. That's not the real product. So these things can look extremely real, and it's something you can build in a matter of hours or days. And here's the really important point here. If you can't sell the demo, you're not going to be able to sell the MVP. Right? So imagine you create that perfect slide deck, you create that demo, you've got a great promise, and you show the demo, and the customer's like, I don't care. Well, if that's how they're responding to your demo, guess how they're going to respond to your MVP that you would spend 6 months building? They'd have the exact same response. And the only difference is that instead of being out a couple hours or a couple days, you'd be out 6 months of hard effort. So really the demo is the best possible proxy you can put forward for your idea without having to go through all the effort of building out the MVP. The demo is the fastest learning tool possible. So it gives you high emotional impact, because when a customer can see the promise in action, because that's really what the demo does, is bring it to life, then it's going to give you big signals fast. So you're going to really see how do they respond emotionally to this. So they said this promise is valuable to them. Now I'm showing them a demo and they're either excited or they're not excited. You're getting signal very quickly back from your customers. And the key is that multiple demo iterations are going to beat one slow, expensive MVP cycle. So in that 3 or 6 month time that you could have built an MVP, you can do demo, refine, and get to the point where you're really on track and the customers are really excited about the vision of where you're going. You can do that a lot faster than with an MVP cycle. And demos optimize for speed and clarity. Right. So the speed is because that iteration cycle, and the clarity is because you get more of these feedback cycles where the customer or the potential user can give their feedback a lot faster. And you can do all this with minimal effort. So really, it's perfect validation for an AI era. But wait, there's more. So demos recruit customers. So during this process that you're out there demoing and asking for feedback, you're building a community of people who actually want this to succeed, right? So a great demo is going to convert a prospect into an early true believer, right? If you find a real high consequence problem and you put this promise in front of them and then you show them, here's what your world could look like, and they're all excited about it, imagine that when you walk away, well, they still want the thing, right? So now they're supporting you, like they want this to come to life. And the early adopters are going to help you shape the real MVP. So rather than take a guess at what that 6-month MVP looks like, as you're going through these iteration cycles, these early adopters are helping you define that. And it's allowing you to gain validation, traction, and momentum simultaneously as you do these iterative demos. And it shortens the path from idea to that first paying user, because again, they're buying in, they're giving you the requirements. So the more precise that you get your idea over time by iterating these demos, you're going to get to that first paying customer a lot faster. So demos bring your idea to life. All right, and before we go, let's look at the full range of MVE options that are available to you, right? Because demo is only one of them. So let's kind of see where it fits into the full context. MVE is the easiest experiment to learn. At one extreme, you've got the full product, right? So, years of work building a full product before you get any feedback. So iPhone would be a good example of this, right? It was built in secret. It took years and tons and tons and tons of work went into it before any users were able to come back and see what the final product looked like. MVP, obviously, this is the go-to for the past 10, 15 years for startups, right? Months of building, faster learning than full product, but still relatively slow compared to what's possible in the AI world. A demo is kind of the sweet spot, right? Where it's hours or days to take a promise and to get that validation where someone says, yeah, this is it, let's go. But there's actually some things you can do that are even lighter weight than demo, if it makes sense. And so one example is called a 404 test, right? So the question here is, will they click? And it's called the 404 test because when it was first created years ago, I think TripAdvisor created it by mistake, right? Where they had a miscommunication between their marketing team and their development team. A new feature was supposed to go online. I think someone told the marketing team it was ready to go. They flipped it live, it wasn't ready. They came in the next day and they had tons of these 404, right, page not found errors in their log. And they freaked out because they're like, oh my God, all these people clicked and they didn't get anything. And then they stopped for a second and said, wait a second, all these people clicked. That's really interesting signal. So they could look at the button itself made a certain promise and see what were people expecting when they clicked that button. And then they could go back and determine that. So they actually turned this into a process called the 404 test, where new idea, instead of building out the whole idea and spending like weeks or months to build it, just put the button out and see will people click it. So this is something that you can do. Put up an experimental page, see will people click it? Are they interested in it? Will they sign up for a wait list or something like that? So that's something that's even faster than a demo in some cases in terms of getting validation. And then the other way to get feedback is research, just look it up, right? So this is something where before you test an idea, has someone built it? Are there people, you could go to Amazon Books, have people written books about this problem? What are the reviews? Do people validate those problems? Things like that. So this just kind of gives you the full range of solutions that you have to use and see where MVE fits in that mix. So I've seen many founders spend 6 months grinding out an MVP only to discover that nobody wanted it. And you don't have to go through that. With MVE, you can learn faster and test smarter. Now, your next move is pretty simple, right? Don't build an MVP, build a demo instead. Find a high consequence problem. Develop a powerful promise. So test like what are different solutions that if you hypothetically built those solutions, a customer would be, yeah, I'd be excited about that. Test the promise, then build something real. All right, so I hope this was useful. And if you have any questions about the process or the way we approach it, feel free to comment. And obviously, if you want to see more of these, please remember to like and subscribe, and we'll be talking to you soon.